All right, chapter 14, here we go. In all of his plottings, Luke had never thought of the screen door being locked. Though he knew his own parents locked up at night, when they didn't forget, the doors at his house had always been open for him, and he'd never been near anyone else's door. Idiot, he muttered to himself. He tugged harder on the door, but he couldn't concentrate enough to make his hands work together. Each second that passed made his hair on the back of his neck stand up more. He'd never been so exposed in his entire life. Hurry, 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 get out of sight. The door didn't budge. He'd have to turn around, now. That was what his brain said. What his hand did was plunge through the screen door. He pulled the wire away from the frame and reached through. Bro, this dude's breaking into this house. The screen scraped the back of his hand and his arm, but it didn't stop. He fiddled with the lock inside until he heard it click. He silently slid the screen door back and stepped past the hanging blinds into the sports family's house. Even with the blinds blocking every window, the room he entered was airy and bright. From the freshly painted walls to the sparkling glass tables to the polished wood floor, everything looked new. Luke stared. Almost all the furniture in his own house had been around as long as he could remember, and whatever patterns and designs it originally carried had long ago been worn away. At his house, even the once orangish couch and the once greenish chairs were now all matching sort of brownish gray. This room was different. It reminded him of a word he'd never heard and only read. Pristine. Nobody had ever stepped on these white rugs with manure-covered boots. Nobody had ever sat at those pale blue couches with corn-dusted covered jeans. Luke might have stood by the door forever, in awe, but someone coughed in another room. Then he heard a strange beep, beep, beep. He tiptoed forward. Better to discover than to be discovered. He went down a long hallway. The beeps had turned into a drawn-out buzz coming from the room at the end. Holding his breath, Luke stopped outside the door to that room and gathered the nerve to peek in. His heart pounded. There was still time to escape unseen, to go back to his house and attic and normal, safe life, but he'd always wondered. Luke leaned forward slowly, moving a fraction of an inch at a time, until he could just barely see around the door. Inside the room was a chair and a desk and a big apparatus that Luke vaguely recognized as a computer. And the computer, typing away furiously, sat a girl. Luke blinked, thrown off. Somehow he'd never thought about the sports family's third child being a girl. She was mostly facing away from Luke, and she wore jeans and a gray sweatshirt not much different from the sports family's brothers always wore. Her dark hair was almost as short as Luke's. But there was something about the curve of her cheek, the tilt of her head, the way her sweatshirt clung and didn't cling to her body. All of it made Luke certain she wasn't like him. He blushed, and then gulped. The girl turned her head. Luke croaked. Before he had a chance to think of another word, the girl was across the room and had knocked him down. Then she pinned him to the floor, his arms twisted behind his back, his face buried in the carpet. Luke struggled to turn his head to breathe. So, the girl hissed in his ear, you think you can sneak up on a poor, innocent, unsuspecting girl who's home all alone? Guess nobody told you about our alarm system. A call went out to our security guards the minute you stepped on our property. They'll be here any second. Luke panicked. So this was how he'd die. He'd had to explain. He had to escape. No, he said. They can't come. Oh, yeah? The girl said. Who are you to stop them? Luke raised his head as much as he could. He said the first words that came to his mind. Population police. The girl let go. Bro, she straight slammed him. For real. For real. Chapter 15. Luke sat up, checking his arm to make sure he didn't break anything. You're lying, the girl said. But she made no effort to tackle him again. She crouched, looking puzzled for a few moments, and then she grinned. I got it. You're another one. Great code word. I'll have to think about that, using that for the rally. Now it was Luke's turn to squint in confusion. The girl giggled. I mean, you're another shadow child, right? Shadow? Luke wondered why his brain seemed to be slowing down. Was it just because she'd seemed several miles ahead of him? That's not the term you use? She asked. I thought shadow child was universal, but, and illegal. Someone whose parents broke population law 3903. A third. Luke couldn't bring himself to confess. He'd broken so many taboos today, leaving the house, standing in the open yard, talking to a stranger. Why did one more violation matter? You can say it, the girl coaxed. I'm a third child. Why should there be anything wrong with that? Luke was spared having to answer her because she suddenly sprang to her feet, exclaiming, Oh no, the alarm! She raced down the hall and around the corner. Luke followed her to find her jerking open a closet door and then punching buttons on the panel of colored lights. Too late, drat. She ran to a phone, Luke following breathlessly. She dialed. Luke watched in amazement. He'd never talked on a phone. His parents told him that the government could trace calls, could tell if a voice on the phone was from a person who was allowed to exist or not. Dad? She made a face. I know. Call the security company and get them to cancel the alarm, okay? Pause. And might I remind you that the penalty for holding a shadow child is $5 million or execution, depending on the mood of the judge. She rolled her eyes at Luke while she listened to what seemed to be a long answer. Oh, these things happen. Another pause. Yeah, love you too. Thanks, Dad. All right, we found out the punishment. $5 million or execution. Which is one family don't have money. There's no way they have that much money, right? Yeah. She hung up. Luke wondered if he should run back to the house immediately before the population police really did show up. They can find you now, Luke said, just from the phone. The girl laughed. They say, but everybody knows the government's not that competent. Luke started inching toward the back door just in case. But there really was an alarm? He asked. And you have security guards? Sure, doesn't everyone? The girl took another look at Luke. Oh, maybe not. She winced apologetically as soon as she'd said that. Luke decided to ignore the insult. Why didn't you say that when she looked at him? Yeah, he looked poor probably, right? Compared to her. Do the security guards know you're here? He asked. Of course not, the girl said. If they came, I'd have to hide. Personally, I think my family just has the alarm system to make sure I stay in the house. They don't know I can disable it, but, she gave him an evil grin, I set it off sometimes just for fun. That's fun? Luke asked. He thought another third child would understand him, be just like him. This girl sure wasn't. Aren't you scared the guards might find you? Not really, the girl shrugged. And see, doing it on purpose every now and then helped us today. My dad didn't really even ask why the system needed to be stopped. He just thought it was me making trouble again. In a twisted way, she kind of made sense. But trying to figure everything out made Luke's head hurt. He glanced toward the door. If he could just get safely home, he'd never complain about being bored again. Here, he felt as baffled as Alice in Wonderland from one of those old books in the attic. Or he remembered something he'd read in a nature book. Maybe he was like the prey of a snake that has hypnotized its victims before it ate them. He didn't think the girl would hurt him, but she might keep him confused and fascinated until the population police or the security guards or someone else arrived. The girl saw where he was looking. Am I scaring you? She asked. Shadow kids can be so jumpy. You're safe, How about if we start over? Would you care for a seat? What's your name, anyway? Luke told her. Nice to meet you, the girl said, shaking his hand in a way that made him feel like she was kind of making fun of him. And then she led him to sit down on the couch in a room he first entered. She perched beside him. I'm Jen. Really, it's Jennifer Rose Talbot. But do I look like a Jennifer? She shook her head and spread out her arms as if Luke should understand something from her rumpled sweatshirt and messy hair. Luke frowned. don't know, he said. I don't know any Jennifers. Just Matthew and Mark and Mother and Dad. He knew his parents' real names were Edna and Harlan, but he wondered if he shouldn't keep that a secret, just in case. Probably he shouldn't have even mentioned Matthew and Mark, but he was surprised into it, thinking suddenly about how there was a world full of people outside his house, with a world full of different names he'd never even heard of. The girl said. Then I have to explain. A Jennifer's supposed to be like really girly and prissy, so joke's on Mom. She wanted some frilly little girl she could put in a lacy dress and sit in the corner like a doll. She paused. Are Matthew and Mark your older brothers? Luke nodded. So you've never met anyone outside your immediate family? Luke shook his head no. Jen looked so amazed. He felt he had to defend himself. And you have? He asked, with almost the same taunting voice he sometimes used with Mark. Well, yeah, she said. But you're a third child, too, Luke protested. A shadow child, right? He suddenly felt like he might be easy to cry if he let himself. All his life he'd been told he couldn't do everything Matthew and Mark did because he was a third child. But if Jen could go about freely, it didn't make much sense. Had his parents lied? Don't you ever hide? He asked. Sure, Jen said. Mostly, but my parents are very good at bribery, and so am I. She grinned wickedly, and then she squinted at Luke. How do I know? How did you know I was a third child? How did you know I was here? Luke told her. Somehow it seemed important to start with the woods coming down, so it turned into a very long story. Jen interrupted frequently with questions and comments. So you've never been away from your house except to go to your backyard or barn? You stayed inside for 6 months? Gosh, you must really hate these houses, huh? And then, when he got to the part about seeing her face in the window, she bit her lip. My dad would kill me if he knew I'd done that. But the mirrors were messed up, and Carlos beat me, and I didn't even know what the weather was outside. Oh, bet me. I didn't even know what the weather was outside, and... Huh? Luke said. Mirrors? Carlos? Jen waved away his question. Luke Garner, she announced solemnly, you have come to the right place. Forget that hiding like a mole stuff. I'm your ticket out.
Okay, please.
No, we gotta stop there.
No!
Alright. Craziness, bro. First person he's ever met outside of his family.
Since they're not
It's her.
trying to read